There was not a chance in hell I was going to be able to get this down the way I needed to if I was just writing it. Right? Okay. So we have replaced our lizard folk, our Wanti, and our orcs with one race, which is loosely based off of the Ikeshti race from the first Starfinder Alien Archive. Now, this choice to make our orc race Ikeshti gives us a lot of nuance, a lot of gender roles, and a lot of things we can play with the lifestyle. Now, I want to point out that our orc factions are also partly based off of the Ravagers from the Tal'Dorei campaign setting made by Matthew Mercer. Particularly, the fact that it's big coalition, they're kind of, evil and conquery, and our main bad guy happens to come from there. Now, Ikeshti life cycle has a smaller, I'll say goblin-like phase, a adolescent phase, a phase where they go into rut, which makes them bigger and have spikes and shit and end up mating. Both the males and females do this. And then they have like 3 outcomes out of the rut. 2 if they mate successfully based on their gender, and then 1 coming out of it where they don't mate, and that's the Riveners. Now, the Riveners, continue to stay in rut, basically lose their entire mindset, and become these massive monstrosities. The other 2 are a more society-based, like, grand-scale thing, and that's the females, and then the males generally become caretakers that their entire, life is based around taking care of a group of young. They're called broodminders, and they focus on the small scale, on building Ikeshti up individually, while the females end up focusing on society as a whole, right? And they're typically fairly intelligent, tech-savvy, they have emotions, but they have a cold side to them. It's a great race. It is a really well fleshed out race, and I actually think it's better fleshed out than the basic lizard folk Wanti or orcs are individually anyway. Because with any of those 3, you have to add stuff to them to really work with them. Like purebloods that have a little bit too much humanity in them mixed into there and shit like that. Now, the Ravagers from Matthew Mercer's campaign setting have 2 concoctions which enhance their fighting force. One, called the Skullfire Potion, turns their goblins into Ravager stabby stabbers and turn off their brain function and just make them mindless killing machines that come in a swarm of death. Something that is already possible if you fuck with an Ikeshti brood is being attacked by a swarm of death. So my proposal to make this Ikeshti Scourge thing all the more barbaric and terrible that is happening to their society, and to give you a lot of sympathy for the main enemy who is now doing whatever it takes to stop that from happening, including, coming after the main character and his family and shit, is because he wants that Titan artifact to go back and stop this shit from happening. Because his village has already been taken over. He has been brought in to the Scourge, whether he likes it or not, and has even been recognized for his prowess and made a very major character. Now, that being said, the idea of the Skullfire Potion being the rutting hormones that you purposefully give to the young in order to create a killing mess that are covered in more spikes and are hypermuscular, but also they're still adolescent as fuck, that is terrible. That is, vile at the utmost level, and I'm sure chemically experimenting on children will elicit a response from us social human creatures watching this story, and you will 100% understand why this broodminder went from 0 to 100 real quick. He is pissed, he is smart, and he is doing whatever it takes to make shit happen. And potentially, later in the story, depending on the choices you make, you could choose to help him fix this problem, or you could just take him out and move through the rest of the game without that. Or basically, like, stop him and also stop the scourge. There's some potential there. I think we want him to eventually be an ally, and that to be heavily choreographed as you learn about this society that exists mostly in the mountains and in the desert. And very, like, explicitly, the Ravagers from Matthew Mercer's setting gave themselves a concoction that they constantly have to inject into themselves that's also sort of imbued with holy magic. And that concoction is going to include that same Rivener rutting hormone that makes them these huge, like, lizard hulks, right? But they're still going to have their brain on them as well as some magical shit. And those are, the big bosses. Those are the Slaughter Lords of the Ravagers that will be, like... So you see how combining these two pieces of inspiration has created this thing? And keep in mind that our main bad guy, I actually called him the main character because I've put so much effort into him. Our main bad guy was a broodminder. He had a wife, right? And she was the leader of this tribe, and she was the one who was taken out, which is a thing in its own right. But the fact that essentially the kids he had taken care of are going to be part of this mess, of this all-consuming militant faction that is loosely inspired by the Mongol horde. This is great! This is a good ass, just framework for a story. There is so much we can do here, especially if we get into the details. Oh, so many characters can exist in this society, in this part of the world, that we are explicitly making the problem. And you, as the main character, as this human, will be part of the solution. And that's the plot of the first game. Solve the Scourge. Get rid of it. And then, of course, rebuild the kingdom in the mountains with the Akeshti. They're a good set of people, for the most part. And by removing, the lizard folk lack of emotion, the Wanty lack of emotion and, deliberate cold logic calculation, and the orcish, godly influence that you must rampage the world, or dark forces have twisted elves into this monstrosity. No, they're just a group of people with a life cycle that is relatively violent, but they very deliberately try. Riveners, when they're found, are typically killed on the spot. They consider it deeply dishonorable for that scourge to exist as part of their race. Meanwhile, those actually in charge of the scourge, the Slaughter Lords, kind of just, they're fucked. They are legitimately evil, but the bad guy you interact with the most, he's could have been the hero type with a serious ruthless streak, because he is going to do whatever it takes to stop that, and it doesn't matter what else is going on. Okay, that was 10 minutes. I'm probably just going to upload that to YouTube. Jesus Christ, that is... Oh! Oh, ooh. Terrible writers steal from one set of ideas. Good writers steal from nowhere. And great writers steal from everywhere. And just make this new idea and thing. And oh, we need to finish fleshing out what we're making this race into. We know, generally speaking, they're big lizard people, and they have this type of lifestyle and life cycle. I think I want to loosen the gender norms and make that more of like a life societal thing, that can come out of it. Like it's a personal choice rather than keeping it set in stone, because having it still be a gender locked, like there's roles in the society after they've, you know, mated, is still, relatively problematic, and I think it doesn't fit what we want to do. And having the broodminders literally be like, they have no preference over whose kids are whose, they just want to take care of kids, is a good thing, because that helps us with explaining some of the things that have happened in the past. And we already have characters in world that are designed around this race existing, and it has been a favorite for a while among my various players when we were doing this as a D&D world instead of a Titans Battalion world. And now all of these ideas are just sort of lining up. Oh. Okay, now it's been 12 minutes. See ya.